Ushiri Giri, and could you take us through the journey of what that would look like with a specific skill?
So when so Tanya would have first started learning Ushiri Giri. So for those who don't do Japanese martial arts, it's a back kick, and it's typically taught with a step across, turn, and then you kick backwards, because it works on a lot of mechanics then. And Tanya would have been learning this by about her fourth belt, would have been around the time she would have started to do it. And the videos that we've got were prior to Tanya doing her black belt, so just the grade before. And it's always been a kick Tanya struggled with, but I should also point out it's a kick that many people struggle with. There are lots of people I know who still can't do it, not very well. They can do it enough to be passable, which is fine. Everyone's built differently and so on. But this one particular lesson we were working, I think we were actually just working on some individual techniques just to look for improvement. And I spotted that Tanya was she was struggling with the kick. So if I said she did everything, if you were to write it and to describe it, everything was done correctly. You know, she stepped across, she would turn, she kicked backwards, she turns and recovers the way she kicked. The problem was that the kick was always going off at a massive angle in comparison to the target. I mean, we're talking sort of, you know, probably like a 45 degree angle away from the target in some cases. And then normally her balance would go and I know she won't mind me saying this, but Tanya was getting incredibly frustrated, to the point where I don't think anyone wanted to go and train with her because there was a face of thunder there, of that frustration that she knew how to do it, and she knew she should be able to do it, but why can't she do it? And I could see that. So mid-class, I just took her aside for a moment. And the difficulty with a back kick, and this is why I think it's a good example, is because when you do it, you don't actually look in the direction you're kicking. The idea is you know where your target is, and you purely work on essentially a what would the term be? I guess it's proprioception, the feeling of that physical movement to know where it's going to hit. And because Tanya couldn't see what was going wrong, I could understand why it was even more frustrating. So it's actually a technique that relies on external influence if you're going to improve it for anyone, really. And all I did is I just took Tanya to the side and basically said, take a breath. This is what's happening. I didn't say what was causing the problem. All I said was that your kick is going off an angle and you're losing your balance. And I started with, why do you think that is? Because it's more important for me to see what Tanya comes up with, what she thinks the problem might be. In all honesty, I can't actually remember her response, but based on that response, then gave me the opportunity to do something next. And all I did was I went and got my phone, I took a video of her doing the kick, and that was it. And then I just turned it around and we watched it on my phone. And of course, that was the first time that Tanya had actually seen her doing the kick. And this bit I do remember clearly because she was really frustrated with how bad it looked. And I had to sort of, you know, hand on shoulder and say, don't worry, we'll sort it out. And all I did was I tried to identify with Tanya being involved in the process of working out what the fault was. And so it would be a case of, if memory serves, Tanya identified correctly that the kick was off target, her balance was off, and her head was dropping quite low. And so even if there were no solutions there, we knew Tanya had identified 3 points that she thought were vital, and I agreed. And all I did then was I just tried to address them one at a time. And I gave Tanya an exercise to try and get her to make the foot. And this is where the coaching side came in. Her kick was off target because the foot was lifting sort of outside the body and going almost around her body. Whereas ideally the foot should pass underneath the line of the body instead. It should sort of go, you know, like under the pelvis and under the central line. I said, use the flat of your foot to kick the back of your own thigh. Now, from a technical point of view, that's not how you do the kick. But all it did is it just tried to encourage the the repetition of the foot coming underneath the body and not lifting around it. And if I remember correctly, we said, I think, kick the back of the leg, your own leg 3 times, and then on the 4th one, kick forwards. And there were still balance issues because we hadn't addressed those. But immediately what happened was, with the foot coming under the line of the body, the kick would go closer, if not on target. And it was getting that little bit underneath. And I think you probably, would you say you felt a difference in that early on? It's hard to remember.
I think it was. I think if I did, I think it was quite a small difference.
Yeah.
And I think even at that point, I do remember that I was still really frustrated and quite annoyed.
Yeah. So, but what we did then was we took a video of Tanya doing that, and I used the slow motion feature on my phone. I mean, in fact, I bought my phone very much based on the idea that it had a very good quality slow motion camera, because I had ideas of potentially using it in the club. And so once Tanya did that exercise, I videoed that one and showed her the difference. And the fact that Tanya could identify the difference and see, oh, that was an improvement, started to get rid of a little bit of that frustration. And then from that point, it was a case of working on the balance and the posture. And the turn is a difficult part. I mean, she knows how to do it. She knows step across with the front foot, because it changes your alignment. You can rotate on the base of your feet, and essentially what would now be your front leg is in a position to kick straight backwards, and that's where the target is. But what would often happen with Tanya is that as she would step across, her body weight would come up, and as she turns, with the head being, the heaviest part of the body, it threw her weight off to the side, so that she was sort of twisting away from the target every time she did it. And the focus for me then was, I need to find a way to get her lower. And in the end, the phrase that I think clicked for Tanya was, I said, imagine you're screwing your body down into the floor. And in the video, you can actually see there's a moment where Tanya hesitates, and I'm guessing sort of has that moment where she thinks of that phrase, and you can see her sort of turn and low and crouch her body into the floor.
And actually,
and at that point, does
on the most recent one, I'm not sure if I've actually got the video on my phone, but I think I had that in my mind when I was doing that.
Well, actually, more than likely you have. I'm assuming you're looking for it. It'll be up on the screen here. But that recent video of you doing it in the gym is, I mean, you've been away for, is it a year now? And you said it.
Yeah.
I know it's certainly been a long time since you did that and went through it in that process. And I think what's great is that even after all that time, it's clearly stayed there in Tanya's development, and it's now it's made a long-term difference, not just a short-term gain. And yet,
I mean, I could feel how to do it. Like, I could feel like, and it was that thing again. Like, I knew when I did it, I was like, okay, it's gonna feel like this.
Yes, and I think when we did the videos in the club at the time, it was really helpful for Tanya to have that visualization of it. And the only other thing that we did, because I think that whole process probably took us 10 to 15 minutes to get a massive, what I think is a massive improvement for any student, whether they had dyspraxia or not. I think is a massive improvement.